At the time of this recording, our good friend Barokatir has brought some offerings for the weekend, and he doesn't have to still be here for this video to be useful. Incidentally, if he is, I recommend picking this up. But he brought some stuff, and as he often does, he brings some things that are a little bit janky, expensive but janky. Super Vandal is a great weapon. It's MR14, but it's only 500 ducats and some credits. Prisma Tetra is MR4, okay, but 400 ducats. I don't really imagine a lot of MR4 players having 400 ducats, correct me if I'm wrong. But the thing is, this weapon is also just not good. It doesn't really have any critical stats. You can't build crits effectively. It's not an effective multiplier. Status is great, but for a weapon with high fire rate and a decent magazine, status was already going to be great. This is the kind of weapon that could actually afford to have lower status. A good example of a weapon that is somewhat similar in how much base damage it has, its relative stats, whatever, is a weapon like the Soma Prime. It has pretty meager status and pretty respectable crit, but that weapon works out because it's already got high fire rate. You get plenty of chances to proc that relatively lower status, and it works out, and you end up having your nice hybrid build, and it works great. Prisma Tetra, not so much. This weapon is not very good. However, as I'm sure some of you are aware, it can also do this, which is, well, it's pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh yeah, right. It's fun. Friggin', this is a fun weapon. It can be fun. So if you must, I'm proud to present to you, well, proud is a strong word, the Prisma Tetra. So in this video, we're going to go step by step through what you might want to do with a weapon that you find fun, but which is not good. We often talk about the theorycraft and buildcraft and DPS math and stuff for weapons that are strong, but if you just like a weapon and it's terrible or just not very good, like this one, what do you do? If you just want to use it, well, what do you do? And there are a variety of things. I think that this requires thinking about buildcraft a bit differently. I think in ways it's a bit more interesting, so we're going to talk about that. First of all, some ground rules. When we say the weapon is bad, when I'm saying the weapon is not good, what I mean is a little complicated. What I mean is that in the grand scheme of things, if you have access to everything, it's not good. There really isn't a great reason to use it. What I mean is that at its mastery rank, there are weapons that are easier to acquire, that are stronger. Pretty much everything that you can acquire at that level is either easier to acquire and or stronger than this weapon. It's not worth using. Maybe I should say it that way. And again, worth using, it's tricky there because we're including every definition of worth using except for fun. And again, if you think it's fun, then go figure. If you don't, go figure. This might be a fun exercise in laughing at this weapon with me. So let's talk about what is wrong with this weapon, and then we'll figure out what to do about it. As you can see on the side here, we have some stats. This weapon could have worse stats. It's a very good status for this trigger type. Weapons that have this high fire rate and a reasonable magazine usually don't have status this high. Pretty exceptional amount of status for this kind of weapon, which will be important later, but it's got bad critical stats. Not quite so terrible as some other weapons that are like this, that have high status and low crits. But it's not good enough to be a competitive multiplier. You can't build for crits and gain damage, which is a problem. The general threshold you're looking for with crits is about 15% or so, and obviously if the weapon does very, very few packets of damage, like a sniper rifle, you want that to be a bit higher just for consistency's sake. But for this weapon, it's not even a viable multiplier no matter how many packets of damage you get, which is bad. It's actually particularly bad on rifles because you could have had access to 100 munitions, but you don't. So, what do? Well, we have okay fire rate. The magazine is fine. The reload is 2 seconds, which whatever. And then it's mostly puncture. That's a fine damage type to have most of. It's kind of a shame it isn't slash, but we don't have crits to make the slash do more damage anyway, so it would be mediocre at best. Not the end of the world to have mostly puncture on this kind of weapon. At least it's got a nice base damage type. This weapon also comes with 0 innate polarities. Hey! And you can see that I've put 3 forma on that. We'll talk about that in just a sec. This weapon doesn't really have any polarities. Those lack of polarities, that's designed to foster Stockholm Syndrome with the weapon. As you forma it over and over again, you're just kind of forced to like the weapon a little bit because you have to use it over and over again. Except, oh wait, this weapon is painful with no mods. This is how it looks to fire. Yeah. Not like a lot of kick or anything. It does have this cool thing with the magazine where it goes boop and boop And boop, there's like a little magazine pops off every 15 rounds, which is a cute effect. What a creative and nice effect for a weapon that is hot garbage. Again, this weapon just doesn't do very high damage due to its combination of multipliers. It doesn't come with a lot of polarity, so it's not easy to just throw damage on it, even though that's not usually a way to make weapons powerful. The only real thing that this weapon is good at is doing damage to your squad mate's graphics cards, and it's very good at that. So let's talk about builds that are good at that. Basically, what I have to say about this weapon is that there isn't really a reason to use this unless you're using Kinetic Ricochet. This is the mod that makes the Tetra unique. If you don't use this, then it is literally just Super Vandal with worse stats. It's the projectiles are the same. They behave a little bit differently. They're mostly the same. They have similar IPS spreads. The Super Vandal literally just has a gigantic magazine, better stats, and also a good augment. So the only reason to use this is Kinetic Ricochet. So I'm only going to talk about builds that use Kinetic Ricochet. If you happen to find this weapon fun, which is probably not a huge number of you, and you don't find this mod fun, which is like an incredibly tiny number of you, then I'm sorry, these builds won't be exactly what you're looking for, but the precepts behind them, the ideas behind them will still help. So I've got two builds to show you. But first we're going to kind of build through one. So again, we don't have crit, and we do have status. So there are a few basic mods we can still put on. So some base damage, okay. Heavy caliber, we'll think about that because Kinetic Ricochet, which we can just go ahead and put on now anyway. We feel like there's no point in using this weapon unless we use this, so cool, great. Then we can put on multi-shot. We still want multi-shot, and it'll be fun with Kinetic Ricochet. In fact, decide that it will be good. Probably Vigilante Armaments too. Generally a good inclusion, but especially since we're not going to be using 2 slots on crit mods, like we're probably going to have a space for this. Cool. Then we've got an element. What element should we use? Well, it doesn't have slash, so we can't use viral or cold to synergize with that slash. And there doesn't seem to be any particular reason to use any niche element. So let's just go with corrosive. We get lots of procs, lots of shots. Corrosive sounds all right. So we'll put corrosive on. And again, if you didn't have these dual status elements, especially on a weapon like this, you could substitute the normal one. If you don't have high voltage, that's maybe the one a lot of newer-ish players won't have. It's fine to use Stormbringer, no problem. You definitely do want these over the vanilla ones on this type of weapon. You want a lot of status, and biasing it more for these corrosive procs is not necessarily worth the trade-off of getting less procs in general. Although, I don't know, this split is all right most of the time. It's a nice marginal benefit split. So go figure, you can do either. I'm going to show this. It's cheaper. It's costs less forma. So we have this. Great. This is not the worst thing in the world. It's legitimately, this is not that bad. So we're going to shoot some enemies that are, you know, what do you say? How about level 50 or so? And you're going to see that this is going to be fine. I haven't done this before saying that, but it'll be fine. So we're using Mirage and we're just going to shoot. And like, it's all right. That's fine. And you might be saying, okay, I thought you said this weapon wasn't that good. Well, the thing is, there really isn't anything else we can do to this weapon. Now that we have that build with those 6 mods, we don't have crits. There really isn't anything else we can add. That's it. That's the whole build. So you might think. So what we need to do, if we're going to make the weapon a little bit decent, again, we sort of have accepted that the weapon is not a little bit decent, but if we're going to make the weapon have a bit of punch, and be a little bit more fun by being a bit more serviceable in some other types of content, we're going to have to find something to do with these 2 slots that meaningfully increases the weapon's damage, rather than just adding more elemental damage. Most of the time, what people do, or what I see people do, when they have this situation in a build, is they'll just add more elemental mods, but because these all stack as the same multiplier, you're not actually adding very much more damage to your weapon. Normally, it would be like if you add Infected Clip here, you get 90% toxin damage. So if you have no other elements, that's just 90% DPS. It practically doubles your damage, which is awesome. And when you have these elemental mods, you know, you get status as well, and they combine into a new combined element, which usually they have stronger procs, which is fantastic. So now you've really gained something. But if you add another one, what exactly do you get by adding this? So we'll add this. Now we're going to go back and show the same enemies that I was fighting before. And you're going to see that it's not really that much stronger. It's like still, you kill in maybe 1 less shot. It doesn't really feel that different than before, right? So again, because it's the same multiplier, you're not actually getting that much more damage. This is a bit of a shame and kind of limits our options as far as what we can do with this weapon. What else can we add to make it good? Well, we still have fire rate. We can still add fire rate. Now, generally, I might want something like Prime Shred for this weapon, but Kinetic Ricochet is not going to work well with that. The shots aren't going to bounce because they'll get stuck in terrain. So I'm going to recommend Vial Acceleration. I feel like this weapon is also just a lot more fun. Again, we're kind of building this for fun, so a lot more fun to shoot when you have Vial Acceleration on. Remember when I was shooting before with no mods, and now? Yeah, there we go. Now it feels like a little minigun. That's nice. Much more pleasant feeling to fire. Fantastic. Also doesn't sound as much like a game of ping pong, which is also wonderful. Now we have one more slot. What do we do? Well, Kinetic Ricochet makes the shots bounce up to 6 times and travel 30% further. The thing about the Tetra is that the Tetra's shots actually have a defined flight distance, so they can only fly so far and then they disappear. And you can see that. So if we go here, we shoot like that, you see that actually relatively soon on the trajectory of the shot, normally we'd be able to see things pretty far. The skybox for this tile is like way out there. And you know, because you can get to those pillars that were way off in the distance. Wow, since the remaster, they took them away. Anyway, I'm sure lots of you remember in the old Simulacrum, there used to be those pillars way off in the distance. And so you can go pretty far out there, but these bullets don't. You see that it doesn't even really reach, barely even reaches that platform. And you can certainly go further than that. So these shots have a defined flight time. They just are in the air for a certain amount of time. So to make them bounce more times and hit more enemies and look more fun, you would want to increase their flight speed. So we could add terminal velocity. This will give them 60% projectile flight speed, and then they will probably bounce more because they'll hit more surfaces or enemies, hopefully, in the time that they are allowed to be in the air. So now we'll shoot, and you can see it feels like they fly significantly further, and we'll go back to where we were before and shoot over here. And you can see that they bounce up significantly higher before disappearing, even all the way at the end of the platform, which they didn't even all reach before. Fantastic. So now we've made the weapon even more bouncy, and it's also easier to aim with because the projectiles reach their target faster. You don't have to lead your shots by as much anymore. Great. One tiny other little tweak we can do. This weapon, as you just saw from me firing auto for like 2 shots, I accidentally held the mouse down a little bit too long. You saw this weapon is really not that accurate anyway. So what if we just put heavy caliber on? This is the exact same thing as serration. It just gives you an accuracy reduction. So maybe just having the weapon be more spray-like. Yeah, that feels fun. You just shoot in a general area and it's like, oh, there we go. Very nice. Now we're really getting somewhere. This is a weak but very fun bullet hose weapon. Fantastic. And as you can see, this is pretty much the same as this other build I made. This is the first thing that I thought of was to do this. This is kind of the straightforward thing that I initially thought of. But there's another thing you can do, and that's what you were seeing me do in that initial clip with Mirage and the Elite Sanctuary Onslaught clip. That's this. So the shots bounce all over the place, right? And they have very good status, very consistent status. And we have a lot of space in the build. When you have a lot of space in the build, there are a few types of builds, or like subtypes, like little packages in builds, that don't fare so well if you just have your normal hybrid build. So if we take out a weapon like, what would be a good example? Maybe like Tiburon Prime. That's a simple example. So this is a hybrid viable weapon. I happen to build this for viral and 100 munitions. It's also very good with corrosive. And as you can see, we need every slot we have. There are no slots that we can get rid of. The build practically falls apart if we take out any of the mods, except kind of vigilante armaments, but even then, it gives you more of everything in the build. You definitely want this mod. Serration, the build does way less damage. Split Chamber, the build does way less damage, is way less consistent. Point Strike, Vital Sense, 100 munitions doesn't work and you do no damage. Viral, you have no good damage type and nothing good to proc. And then without 100 munitions, the viral, there's much less of a point. You're not dealing with armor. So this is a very tight build. Now, it's a very good build. The fact that it's tight is good. The fact that we have no free slots is because there are so many good mods for this type of weapon. That's a good thing. But what's true is that there are some packages, little sets of mods, combinations of mods, little sub-themes in a build that take up too much space for that kind of build. And when you don't have those things, when you don't have Point Strike and Vital Sense in your build taking up that space, there are these little packages that you can sort of use the extra space for. You can add a gas package. So you're going to build gas with your dual status elementals. And then because gas procs trigger AoE toxin procs that deal damage based on the modded toxin damage on the weapon, not heat and toxin, just only toxin mods, you want to add a 90% toxin elemental as well. That massively, massively increases the amount of damage gas does. So you really want 3 slots. If the weapon is innate heat, that's really good for gas. And that's because you won't need 3 slots. You could do it in 2, just like a normal hybrid build. Maybe a bullet will hit an enemy, proc gas, hit that gas proc will hit another nearby enemy, and then that bullet will hit that other enemy and proc gas, which will hit the first enemy. Usually that's what makes gas good when it hits multiple targets. And this weapon might do that, certainly not on purpose, but if you shoot it into a crowd, it might do that, which is good. It's got high status, so it'll do that consistently. For an auto weapon, this has alright damage per bullet. This is like a fine amount of base damage. And we can bias it pretty heavily for gas. We can just load on the 3 mods to heavily bias for gas. Great. We've got that multi-shot, we got vial acceleration. We did have to drop terminal velocity, which was a little unfortunate, not really the end of the world. We're mostly going to be shooting into tight crowds with this, so further reach and flight speed matters a lot less. And it's also a little unfortunate that with 3 Forma, if you have all these mods maxed out, you just barely can't fit heavy caliber. But as I said, I'm building this weapon a bit differently because I am trying to build it for fun. And I honestly do not recommend that you put a 4th Forma in this to gain 1 or 2 mod capacity so you can put heavy caliber in. In fact, I would strongly consider just ranking down thermite rounds or vigilante armaments a little bit so that you can fit heavy caliber, just like for fun. Again, it barely improves the weapon. It's not worth a Forma for almost any type of player. In fact, even I, where it's my job to do this and I can buy platinum as a business expense, even I didn't decide to do that. So go figure, take it or leave it. And this thing is pretty serviceable. So we'll fight the enemies that we fought before. With the weapons, haha, we're going to use the Mirage thing. And you can see it's not bad. So without aiming, we're still killing them as fast as we were before. Pretty nice. Now, even with just a single Mirage, you can see shot into a group, that's not bad. Those enemies did not have a good time. And if you get them against the wall, the nearer they are to any kind of terrain, usually the more damage they take. Because the bullets will bounce off the walls, they bounce off them, bounce off the ground, bounce back to them. And you can see it has decent killing power. Because gas is a nice little force multiplier, you're making up for the lack of critical stats on the weapon, and this is allowing you to kill enemies with armor without reducing or countering the armor in any way, just because you have adequate force multipliers to overcome it. When you use gas on those bigger, more serious weapons like the Archiplasmor, you have that crit, that status, and then you have those gas procs, and that combination of force multipliers, that's what's letting you kill armored enemies, even though you have no corrosive, no viral, no slash, no cold, whatever. And if you were to run corrosive projection with a gas weapon, it benefits much more because the gas is not really dealing with armor in any way, it's just trying to overwhelm it. So the more organized your group is, the more corrosive projections you can stick in there. Or maybe you'll be lucky in a public squad and your people are just running corrosive projections, that's great. Then these types of weapons will do much better, where corrosive and viral weapons generally do not do better with 1 versus 2 corrosive projections in your party. So we've created a weapon that is kind of-ish capable of killing higher level enemies. Kind of, sort of, not so much, but it's not completely incapable of doing harder content in the game. So that was like Sortie 1 enemy level. We can move it up to Sortie 3, and you will see, some damage. It's not going to be, don't get too excited. Just to get them to cluster a bit more and mimic enemies being stuck in a hallway, we're going to use Dracmasters. You're going to spawn there, spawn a bunch of dudes, and we're going to go, wah! And you can see, actually, not bad. Not bad at all. Just not even half bad. Not, like, amazing or anything, but it's really fun. It looks really ridiculous. Your teammates will really hate you. Your graphics card will really need to be replaced. Let me just finish this video by clarifying that I'm not really encouraging you to do this specifically with Mirage. You don't really need to do that for it to be fun, I don't think. And your teammates will thank, the world will thank you. You'll be a hero for just for not doing that. Look how much this looks like those rocket pops from the 90s. So if you must, that's how I recommend using the Prisma Tetra. I hope you have fun with it if you decide to invest in it, and I hope that you enjoyed my video. Here at the end, I'm sure you know what to do, so I'll catch you on the other side.